coming from a third world country like Venezuela and moving to the United States created an inverse shock.
Yes.
Why? Because I was used to not having a lot of resources available and then having all the tools and having everything at my disposition here in America.
And I learned to become very, very happy with very, very little. I was not in an environment of abundance.
Okay.
And I didn't know that America was an environment of abundance because that was my baseline. That's what I understood. I realized that travel was the most valuable form of education that there is. Look, I've been to college, I have a master's. Those things cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm not saying you shouldn't go, but dollar per dollar, you learn much more about yourself and the world you live in traveling than you would ever learn in a university. Right? It's one thing to make money. It's another thing to do something positive for the world. But can you do both at the same time?
Hello guys, this is your host Gian Lucas. Welcome to another episode of Making an Impact. Today we're privileged to have one of my best friends, Stephen Bolotin, a professional whose remarkable life experiences will drive you crazy. Stephen is an expert in the public policy environment, but he has a personal background on traveling the world that is worth expanding on. Stephen, welcome to the show. More than honored to have you here. You know, you're one of my best friends. You helped me through some challenging times in life, and I'm just thrilled to have you here sharing your story and letting people know what your life is and who you are.
Well, it's great to be here, Gian, and thank you for the invitation.
Appreciate it. The first question, and this is something from the personal standpoint. When I met you and we started talking a lot, as friends, we were neighbors. We used to be neighbors here in Miami. One of the first things you told me was that you have traveled through many different countries, both rich and poor environments. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that left you with some fulfilling experiences, but some hard rock reality shocks that you learned from it. But coming back to my question, could you remark something that a life experience within your travels that changed you, that switched something in your brain?
Yeah, let me think about that. I started traveling the world avidly in over 20 years ago. I think the first major country that I visited that was, really different from the United States was India. That was in 2005. And I lived there for 5 months. It was part of a study abroad program when I was an undergraduate. And it's not just leaving the West. It's hard, some countries, if you're an American, and I have that perspective as traveling as an American, you will sometimes go to places. If you go to England, if you go to Australia, you see like little cultural differences. Like they say the language a little bit differently. They eat some different food. But then if you go to a place like India, it feels like entering a completely different world. And that's why I chose to study abroad there. I had a homestay family that was Hindu. I also had a homestay family that was Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist exiles. And I studied the local language. They have 18 official languages in India. So I only studied Hindi, but it's a very diverse country. And that experience is the one that set me on the path to wanting to travel the world. And I have been to over 50 countries, been to most of the continents, haven't been to Antarctica, but pretty much all the rest.
More to check the mark. Yes. It's interesting that you mentioned India because I'm pretty aware of how the situation might be over there. I'm pretty sure if we talk to an Indian guy or an Indian person, they will tell us they were aligned with your description. But one thing I do remember having was coming from a third world country like Venezuela and moving to the United States created an inverse shock.
Yes.
Most likely an inverse shock that the one you had. Why? Because I was used to not having a lot of resources available, or at least we thought we didn't have a lot of resources available, and then having all the tools and having everything at my disposition here in America to make my dreams come true. Would you say that was like somebody pop up your bubble when you went to India?
Well, there was definitely culture shock when I went to India. And it is definitely one of those countries that if you choose to go, I wouldn't recommend going for just a week because the adjustment period takes some time. I think it could take 2, 3, maybe even 4 weeks until you sort of like get into the Indian rhythm of how things are done there. And the first few weeks are just, it's shocking. Everything's different. You don't have personal space. As a white guy, like there's no way to blend in, right? There's no way to not look like a foreigner in a place like that.
Absolutely. I mean, you look pretty American though.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, they, you know, if I'm in that situation, they'll say, are you English? Are you American? Da, da, da. But there was definitely culture shock going. India is a country with very, very rich people and very, very poor people. And I'd never been exposed to that mix of things, like poverty. Like I'd never seen children naked, covered in flies because they're so poor before. Like that was a thing I saw. And I would see them right next to beautiful temples and other religious sites that I wanted to go see. And you know, some of that was natural. Honestly, some of that is unnatural in India just because there's a whole industry around beggars that are criminally organized, and they know to bring out kids that look very innocent, and they collect all the money and it goes to bad guys. So even if you help them out, it doesn't make a difference. But there was a level of culture shock when I went there. Honestly, the culture shock of returning to the United States was worse because of what you were sort of going at. Because I had learned over the course of 5 months to speak a foreign language. Kind of Hindi was one of the first foreign languages that I really ever learned how to speak, like actually kind of well. I learned to eat with my hands because they don't use utensils there. You know, sitting on the floor, you know, lentils and rice and chapatis, which are little flat breads. And I was in big cities, but I was also in rural villages that were very poor. And I learned to become very, very happy with very, very little. I was not in an environment of abundance.
Okay.
And I didn't know that America was an environment of abundance because that was my baseline. That's what I understood. And I remember shortly after I returned, I left for India in August. I came back at the end of December. And one of the first things, my dad picked me up from the airport. He wanted to go to the grocery store to get some things that I like. And I was just so shocked at the grocery store.
Like because the level of abundance.
The level of abundance, like, you know, 75 different types of cereal. Like, why is that necessary? And I was actually kind of disgusted, to be honest, to be in a place where people have so much need, and then to come to a place where there's so much abundance, so much excess. It's just like there's so much waste here. You know, people throw away so much stuff. It's so normal to go to a restaurant and they serve enough food for 3 people, and then you only eat half of it and you throw it in. I mean, all of these things which are just part of typical life here, I had completely grown accustomed to not being that way. And when I came back, honestly, the culture shock was a little worse because India may be poor in some ways. Again, it's a very diverse, so there are richer areas, there are poor areas, but it's a very spiritually and culturally rich environment. It's a place where people dance in the streets during festivals, religious festivals. I mean, it's that celebratory of an environment. People are very warm. Now, admittedly, there are scammers, and so a lot of people who are going to walk up to you on the street when you first get there, you should not be talking to. But once you recognize what a scam looks like and what someone trying to con you looks like, it's very rapid that you're going to meet friends and you're going to meet people and they're going to be interested in what you're about. They're interested in the fact that you're interested in what they're about. You know what I mean?
I do.
India is a country where they take a lot of pride in their culture, in their religions. I mean, there's more than one religion in India, but Hinduism is dominant. They have hundreds, thousands of gods in Hinduism, and people love talking about it. And they love showing me, like, this is an Indian movie from Bollywood. You know, Indian movies are 3.5 hours long with dancing every 15 minutes. Like, and I couldn't even understand the movies at first, but they were fun. And they, you know, I met people, they showed me their life, you know, and so, yeah, that was the experience that made me addicted to travel.
Okay.
I realized that travel was the most valuable form of education that there is. Look, I've been to college, I have a master's. Those things cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not saying you shouldn't go, but dollar per dollar, you learn much more about yourself and the world you live in traveling than you would ever learn in a university.
I was going to ask you that question because it's not common when you see somebody, usually people who are attracted to traveling the way you have done it, and I think you're going to continue doing it, are triggered by something. And I wanted to ask you if there was an early life influence that provided you with that desire of going after traveling to different countries and being exposed, even though it was a little, you know, it's a little, you have always a little fear when you travel to places like India or remote places like, I don't know, Nepal or something like that. You always have that fear of, I mean, I'm not going to have all the things that I have access right now, but it's going to be an adventure. It's going to be an experience. What was an early life influence that gave you that desire?
That's interesting. I don't remember when I learned the desire to travel, but I am an intellectually curious person. I'm attracted by differences, meaning like when something is just remarkably different or foreign to me or alien or whatever word you want to use to describe it. I think since I was very young, I've been attracted to that and a desire to understand it. So that's not about travel. That's just about this way that I want to explore things. I want to get to know things. I'm a very open person, and I want to have the way I see the world challenge and all of that. I think there were some influences when I was a kid. You know, I grew up in San Diego, California. San Diego, as it happens, I grew up near something called the Self-Realization Fellowship, which is a monastery meditation retreat center that's right on the cliffs of the beach. This is in Cardiff or Encinitas, if you know Southern California. And it was started by a man named Paramahansa Yogananda, who is a yogi. I know people know yoga, but these words, the way we understand some of these practices in India and the way they're actually practiced in India, there are differences.
They're completely different. Yeah.
A yogi is sort of like a teacher or a practicer, and it's not just about yoga, it's about life. But I had been exposed to some elements of culture that really derived originally from India. Buddhism is originally from India, meditation. These movements, Paramahansa Yogananda was, I want to say it was in the 60s or something, was pretty influential in Southern California. And I was just aware of some of these aspects of culture, and I knew that they originally came from India. I wanted to see them at their origins. And I did exactly that when I went there in 2005. And in fact, I meditated with about 200 Buddhist monks in Bodh Gaya, India, under a tree that is related to the tree that the Buddha became enlightened under. So this is not the original tree. He became enlightened a couple thousand years ago. But because of his importance, the tree that's there is literally a relative, a descendant of the original tree that the Buddha became enlightened under. And Bodh Gaya is a very important destination for Buddhists all over the world. There were monks from, Thailand, from Vietnam, Tibetan monks. There are different types of Buddhism, and there was something I would say, like before I went to India, I knew it was a place that I really wanted to visit. I knew it represented about as different as you can get. You know what I mean? Like, how different can you make everything?
Okay.
India was part of that. I knew it was a very
Completely different.
completely
It's a
different. I
country
mean, everything is completely different.
They do completely different the stuff that
Yeah.
we do here in America. Even in South America, I would say it's very different. The way they approach things, we have some things in common, like the family structure and how we're very close to our parents or our family in general. But something that intrigues me a lot is the line of work you perform in the public policy and your travel experiences, and then
which don't seem related.
they don't seem related.
At
But
all.
at the same time, when you dig a little bit into what you offer as a professional, those life experiences granted you with a gift, which is having the position of being flexible, of seeing things through different eyes. And sometimes I feel like we humans require that in order to perform better at a project, at our careers, at our businesses. Sometimes it requires you to be in the position of other people or looking from a different perspective than the one that you're used to understand how it really works. So, but it comes to you. That's why I wanted to ask you this question: is how did your career path and your life experiences, especially the travels, mix? How did they come together?
Well, that's interesting. I want to say two things on that. The first thing I want to say is I've been intentional about keeping them separate because, work is about making money. It's about other things as well, but at the end of the day, we all have bills to pay. So that's why most people work, right? Because they need money. So, and there's something transactional about work. There's something exhausting about work. And I didn't want any of that mixing with my love of travel. Right. I mean, I do travel for work. I just travel domestically. I go and see clients and stuff. But what is special about the way that I've traveled the world is I did it totally independently and totally out of passion. And there was no other motivation. At no point when I was in Hong Kong, or if I was in Istanbul, or if I was in Sao Paulo, or wherever, was I trying to make money out of the experience. I was just trying to have the richest possible experiences I could.
And the closer to reality, the better.
The closer to reality, the better.
I remember this is something obviously we have talked in private talks from the many experiences and time we have spent together. You mentioned that you work in Brazil as an English teacher. And that's working, and you were putting money in your pockets. But even though you were working, you were just trying to create and adjust to the reality that they could have over there and what it was working in a country like Brazil. Now, shifting into the moving and understanding you have lived through many places around the globe. And then you were born and raised in San Diego, and then you moved to Washington, correct?
Yeah, DC.
To DC. And that's when you started working on the public policy.
That's correct, yeah.
And then you recently moved to Miami, which is like, it's curious that you have done some serious life changes from the places you have lived, that I think your mind is kind of adjusted to change, and that's something that creates me. It comes with a question like, what are the tactics that you use to adjust to change so easily?
That's interesting. I think that's a really good observation, and I sometimes take for granted the fact that this is just how I am or how I've become, and that it may not be something that other people feel as comfortable with or is as easy for them. Um, yeah, I mean, obviously, moving from San Diego to DC was a huge change. I mean, the cities couldn't be more different. Obviously, moving from DC to Miami was a huge change. Again, they couldn't be much more different. Um, I don't know. It's funny. I mean, obviously, we didn't prepare for all of this, and so I'm thinking out loud here. Um, I definitely am very adaptable. I'm definitely comfortable with change, although change isn't comfortable, so I don't like using that word.
Okay.
But I don't run away from it. I don't try to avoid it. I embrace it, even though it's very uncomfortable a lot of the time. And that's just how I am. If something has to change, the easiest way is just to take it on. Like, I don't want to avoid it, because then you have a problem down the road that's even bigger than the one that you didn't address early on. So I'm definitely like that. How did I become like that? I'm not going to get into a lot of details, but I had a very difficult childhood.
Okay.